Alrighty. Good morning. My name is Bill Cox, and I will be serving as the acting chairman of the MDTA Capital Committee for today's meeting. I hereby call the meeting of the Capital Committee to order at 9 a.m. In accordance with the live streaming law, this meeting is being conducted via video conference and is being live streamed on the MDTA Capital Committee page. As a reminder, all members of the Capital Committee will have their video active during the entirety of the meeting. To minimize background noise during the call, I would ask that everyone on the line please mute your phones. Anyone who is presenting or answering a question, please turn on your video and audio on when speaking. When you are done, please turn your video off and put your audio back on mute. There are no members of the public, no elected officials, and no media that have pre-registered to comment on today's meeting. At this time, we will move to agenda 1, and if we can have an approval of the minutes. Ask for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Member Sneed. Member Gaines, I think you're motioning by mouth.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Sorry
okay,
about
you're all
that.
set.
I'll second.
Okay. The amendment, the open session meeting minutes are approved. Now we will go to number 2, the approval of FY 2025 of the 2020 Final Consolidated Transportation Program, CTP. Jennifer, welcome.
I apologize. My boss was asking if I was on because she can't get on, and I did have trouble getting on. So my apologies.
Right.
Good morning.
Morning.
For the record.
Morning.
For the record, my name is Jennifer Stump, and I'm the Assistant Capital Program Manager. Today, I am presenting the proposed fiscal year 25 to 30 final CTP and seeking your recommendation for approval to the full board on November 21st of 2024. This will also be presented to the Finance and Administration Committee on November 7th of 2024. The proposed 6-year fiscal year 25 to 30 final CTP is $5.1 billion. This reflects a net increase of $93.9 million as seen on attachment number 1, line 7. The net increase is a result of the following: a decrease in the 6-year CTP budget by $391,000 for the Francis Scott Key Bridge as seen on line 1. A decrease in the 6-year CTP budget by $16.9 million for the Nice Middleton Bridge as seen on line 2. A decrease in the 6-year CTP budget by $1.9 million for the I-95 ETL Northern Extension as seen on line 3. An increase in the 6-year CTP budget by $214.6 million for all other projects except the Key Bridge, Nice Middleton Bridge, and I-95 Northern Extension and the reserves as seen on line 4. And a decrease in the allocated and unallocated reserves by $101.5 million as seen on line 5. The fiscal year 2024 expenditures were $407.4 million versus the $434.4 million budgeted in the fiscal year 25 to 30 draft CTP, as reflected on line number 7. That fiscal year 24 underspending was $27 million and has been rolled over into the final CTP. Highlights of project and reserve changes are shown in attachment 2. For new projects, there were 11 system preservation projects added for a net increase of $12.5 million in the fiscal year 25 to 30 period. For added construction phases, the construction phase of 5 projects was funded for a total of $137.5 million transferred from the reserves as their design reached 60% and cost estimates were developed on fully developed scopes. Modified budgets to reflect completed projects. There were 12 projects completed or deleted for a net decrease of $6.1 million in the fiscal year 25 to 30 period. For projects modified due to cost changes and cash flow adjustments, adjusted cash flows and funded changes in engineering and or construction budgets for 85 projects for a net increase of 51.5 million. In reserve changes, the allocated reserves decreased by 101.5 million and the unallocated reserves remain the same. Attachment number 3 details where the projects are by facility. 36.2% are at the Key Bridge, 19.8% are at Kennedy Highway, 14.3% are at the William Preston Lane Memorial Bridge, 10.2% are multi-area, 8.8% are at Fort McHenry Tunnel, 7.7% are at the Baltimore Harbor Tunnel, and less than 2% each at the ICC, Hayden Bridge, Nice Bridge, and Point Breeze. Attachment number 4 details the category of the projects. We have 37.9% in bridge replacements, 21.9% in structures preservation, 16.5% in safety and capacity improvements, 8.5% in highway preservation, 4.1% in enhancements, 4% in campus facility improvements, 3.3% in campus facility preservation, 2.5% in tunnel preservation, and less than 1% each in environmental and the unallocated reserves. This concludes the presentation where we're seeking your recommendation for approval to the full board.
Questions of the members?
Have we, I got a question.
No,
Go ahead, Member Gaines.
Mario's here.
In the, in lieu of the, hefty costs at the, Princess Scott Key Bridge, has that affected the number of projects we put into the CTP? And particularly the fact that we might only get 90% paid for of the upcoming new bridge.
I would have to check with Jim and get back to you with that information.
I mean, you think it has to hurt. It's got to hurt somewhere. You can't
So,
just.
Member
Go ahead,
Gaines,
Chris.
yeah, I'll say that the 895 project has shifted out, and there's been some minor things, but what you're seeing in this capital program does not reflect any dramatic change because of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And as you may recall, our financial forecast from June did only assume the 90%.
Right, 90%.
So even though we're trying for, yeah, right. So we'll see how that goes. But right now that's we haven't had any major changes with the exception of that 895 project moving out, primarily because of the traffic impacts that we don't want to have take place.
I guess we have no more updates on what the budget will be for the bridge. I mean, that was pretty much not that scientific, I guess. But yeah.
Well, we're working through it in a very with the engineering team and the contractor, but we don't expect to have any revised dates until we get a little farther along costs until we get a little bit farther along in design. So it probably won't be until January that we'll see any revisions to that current estimate.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome, Member Gangemi from afar. Any more questions of the members? Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. We accept the program.
Member Gaines make a motion for. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Member Sneed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you, and thank you, Bruce.
Sure thing.
Okay, next, restrictive covenants on a conservation area, former 1325 G Street Associates LLP. John Wiedemeyer. John?
For the record, this is John Wedemeyer. I'm the real estate manager for the Maryland Transportation Authority. Today, we seek the approval from the Capital Committee to place a restrictive covenant on a conservation area from the ICC. Once MDTA receives the approval, we would seek the approval from the full MDTA board. As part of the environmental permitting process, we are required to put these restrictive covenants on various properties. And as part of the permitting process. Do I have any questions on this process?
Any questions of the members? Do you need approval, John?
So I need approval to place the restrictive covenants.
Okay,
Just to make sure we understand, this land will be protected into the future. There's nothing we or any
perpetuity.
successor agency can do anything about it.
Correct.
Right. I'll make the motion.
is there a
Thank
second?
you. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you, members.
Okay, next update on the AE contracts procurement process, Jeff Davis.
Morning, members.
Morning,
For the
Jeff.
record, my name is Jeff Davis, Division of Procurement here at the Maryland Transportation Authority. And some meetings past, I believe it was member Ganjemi had requested an overview of the A&E process. So that's what I prepared for you today. It's a high-level overview. Opportunity will be there. If you have any questions, please ask. I'll go into any further detail that you might need. And away we go. I'm going to share my screen. Okay.
Jeff, we don't share screens.
How am I going to do this then? I asked this morning if I was supposed to share a screen and I was told not to. I was told I was. So that's why I'm unclear. Okay.
I saw it when you shared it.
Well, it must be a meeting rule where I can't share the slides. That's fine.
Got it. Well, we do have it, so it works too.
Yes.
Yeah, we have it.
The one change I would want to make is I had originally dated it for a September date when I drafted it. I should have updated it for today's meeting date, so I do apologize for that.
No problem.
That was done.
Okay. Okay, so at a high level, A&E contracts are a qualifications-based contract procurement process that we do here at MDTA and MDOT, following very closely to actually the federal model for A&E procurements, because the goal here is to select the most qualified team, especially when we're discussing design and engineering for our major facilities, our signature bridges. So the agenda here is I'm just going to quickly go over the laws and the guidelines that we follow, the steps in the process, which are needs development, CTP request approval, and then the procurement process, which includes expression of interest, technical proposal, and price proposal. Not listed here, but can be assumed the award process after those steps. And then extremely high level contract management of the A&E. I believe I saw Jim was on if you have any specific questions, because that's not something I see day to day on that piece. Okay, so first and foremost, as with all procurement law and guidelines, the first place we go is state finance procurement article. So this is Article 13, which is the Maryland Architectural Engineering Services Act. This provides, base model guidance for how the state is to do architectural engineering contracts. And then what we generally go to on a daily basis or when we're in a project would be COMAR Title 21, Chapter 12, which is the procurement of architectural engineering services and AE services. Now you may see, similarities between an A&E procurement and services RFPs or other RFPs that we have done. But the A&E procurement has its own specific guidance, once again, based largely around qualifications-based selection. We have MDOT A&E consultant selection internal guidelines. So this is something that State Highway maintains, though it hasn't been updated in quite some time, but the process is very mature, with small changes here, there, and how we process things, not so much how we fundamentally do things. We also are very keen to abide by the Brooks Act, which is a federal act requiring qualifications-based selection when you are hiring architects and engineers. Because once again, we want the best qualified to be designing our signature bridges and facilities. And then the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR 36.6 for A&E services. So this is not something we might follow explicitly, because a lot of our contracts are state funded. We will have a few federally funded A&Es coming up related to the Francis Scott Key Bridge. But the Code of Maryland Regulations guides State Highway, who drafts their guides that we follow, so that all of MDOT is aims to be consistent in our A&E processes. Okay, so the major steps. So the end user determines a need, and Division of Planning and Program Development assists in the Consolidated Transportation Plan request or approval. So one major difference between A&E procurement and some of our other procurements here is that we have to get quarterly approval to start them, and that approval request comes from planning, who gets the details to complete the request from engineering. So engineering determines that we need another set of CMI contracts, another set of civil on-call contracts, or they determine we need a specific contract like a GEC for a large mega project. They will complete this package. Planning will submit it to the Secretary's office. The Secretary will approve on a quarterly basis and give us the go-ahead. The end user will develop solicitation, well, mostly the scope of services, and then the procurement officer will help compile those requests into a solicitation format. We will establish a reduced candidate list from that solicitation. If we are doing a two-step or two-phase A&E procurement, you'll see MDTA's been in favor for a lot of more recent procurements, a single phase where there isn't an expression of interest stage. So I'll try to highlight that briefly. And then once a reduced candidate list is obtained, we will request technical proposals. Once we rank those proposals, we will make selections. So when we go to the Secretary's office with the CTP request, we're going to say something to the effect of, we want up to 10 CMI contracts, up to $100 million. So the idea is, we don't know how many proposals we're going to get. We don't know how many we're going to be able to select. We don't know how many are going to be in the competitive range, but we know we're going to want to take up to 10. And then once we determine how many we're going to take, we will then, when I say we, I'm referring mainly to the end user, because engineering are the ones calculating their need here. They will let us know how many of those, how much to provide each one of those contracts. But procurement is involved to make sure that what we're requesting is in line with the CTP request, and what we're requesting is based on sound procurement principles. We will negotiate on audit rates with the end user. With the vendor. So if you've seen in the past some of our A&Es that come over with a fixed not to exceed amount, we know up front we're going to spend $10 million for these services. So once we select the highest qualified team, we will then review the hourly rates they propose, the overheads they propose, and we make sure they're within guidelines. And we make sure that they're not extreme in any particular direction. And we want to make sure that the number of hours we're going to get under this contract are in line with our expectations, the number of hours of work we expect for the funds that we're putting out. And then we would take the award to Capital Committee, Authority Board, and BPW. What you might see sometimes if there's like the example I gave before, 10 CMI contracts or what have you, we may only have 5 negotiated. Well, we're not going to hold up all 10 if we can get 5 of them early for approval and the other 5 can come, you know, at a later date for approval. That allows us to, well, it allows us obviously to get the services faster, but it also allows us to not rush through any more difficult negotiations, or if there's any slow-moving processes, slow-moving proposers, it doesn't hold up all 10 of the contracts.
And we've done that several times in the past.
Yes, yes, it's quite common throughout MDOT. Actually, you'll see if you watch or attend BPW meetings, you'll see something similar where we'll say, you know, this is the first 3 of 10, this is the first 5 of 10, and it's an accepted practice. It's an understood practice. Okay, so when we develop the need for CTP request and approval, all requests for consultant services are initiated by MDTA and submitted to the Transportation Secretary's Office for approval. They include a project description, a high-level scope of services, justification for the need of the services, justification for the requested amount based on historical expenditures, estimated costs and sources of funding, and certification that the work cannot be completed in-house. So this is submitted on a quarterly basis. There's a submission review schedule the planning is aware of, and they know, you know, when they need to have these submissions completed by to get it onto certain CTP approvals. So once that's submitted to CTP approval, engineering sometimes will engage procurement, start planning PRG documentation, start planning early scope documentation, but procurement will, you know, we will support in all these pre-advertisement activities, but the procurement won't actually start until we get that approval from the secretary.
Jeff, I'm thinking for our committee, that would be helpful in the future, the justification based on past history.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's going to be X amount of dollars because this is historically what we've been doing in the past. That's something that would probably be very helpful for our committee.
You talk about in the summary for when we bring a proposal to you?
Yeah, exactly. When you just had to justify to the secretary, hey, we want X amount of dollars for this project, and here's the historical data to back that up. That would be helpful to this committee as well. Is the rest of the group agree with what I'm saying, or am I?
Yes.
Yeah, I
agree.
think so.
Yeah, I mean, as long as, that information should be available from the CTP submission, so we would be able to supply that in our notes to you for
Perfect.
award.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So, okay, I think I covered that slide. So solicitation evaluation. So all the solicitations will include an expanded upon basically version of the scope of services provided to the CTP. We will highlight key staff requirements. Generally, this would be for all positions in the organization that would need to support us for our work orders, but also any specialty staff or specially certified consultants. We will highlight that, you know, they are essential to this work. MBE, VSBE, or DBE goals that were determined at PRG, the due date and time. Obviously, now what we really are evaluating them on, besides the key staff, is also past performance of similar work. We will give them sample assignments that they will have to discuss how they would provide those services. And their goal there is to try to, you know, to show us how effective their team would be at responding to our work requests, our task orders.
Jeff, can you give us, you don't have to do it today, but could you give us an example of something like that? And you can blank out names and all that good stuff, but I'd love to see what test we gave them and how they responded.
Sure. Yeah, if you could imagine, I'll talk with Jim. We'll get a good example for you. But you can imagine if the contract is a facilities inspection contract, we may give them a scenario related to that, and they would say how they would respond, what staff would they employ, and you know how they would address our particular issue. It would be related, of course, to the scope of services for the contract.
Do I assume we also ask once we have our list of people kind of narrowed down, do we do our own sort of, hey, how have they worked out on your projects? Do we go out and ask questions like that? Sort of,
We reserve
even though
the
they've
right.
probably given a reference list, but do we go out and do
Yes.
our own due diligence?
We reserve the right to do reference checks. We will do them. The past performance is also, it's not just about how this firm worked on that contract, it's how the individuals in that firm work.
Got it.
So
Got
one
it.
of the
Thank
things
you.
we're looking at is, did this PM work with this designer before? You know,
Got
those
it.
kinds
Thank you
of
very
things.
much.
We say request proof of financial responsibility. So, you know, obviously we want to work with a firm that has the resources to handle some of our larger design tasks. So generally we will get some sort of letter from their bonding or insurance company describing, you know, their financial resources. Proof of measures and protection against the state. So this is basically.
Jeff, I got a question. Jeff.
Yes, sir.
One question. At this point, probably in the process, if they can't meet those requirements as far as bonding or other requirements, then you would move on to another firm at that point. Is that correct or not?
Yes. So what we would do, so some of these things are, I would say, pass fail, and some of these things are evaluated, and that's determined on a contract by contract basis. So if it's a pass fail thing, it may be a situation where a firm could be found non-responsive to the proposal. If it's a rated thing and they don't give us exactly what we're looking for, but they gave us something, they might just receive a lower score for that that category. But at this point, we are evaluating the firms on a case-by-case basis, but we're evaluating multiple firms to decide who's going to rank highest. At this point, we haven't necessarily made our selection yet.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Measures of protections. So this is a fancy way of saying we want to make sure that they have insurance, professional liability insurances, the bonding that we mentioned. We want to make sure they're going to show us up front that they have those. Later on in the process, I will get request specific insurance certificates showing specific coverages, but they might give them to us up front. But the general idea here is that they will verify to us that they do have these measures of protection in place before we move any further with the firm.
Good.
Okay. So when we establish a reduced candidate list, so this is a situation. So we have the choice to do this two-step process. So you'll see our planning A&E contracts get a lot of interest, right? So we're going to want to shortlist 20 firms, shortlist them to a more reasonable number that we will be evaluating technically. So a lot of the firms will submit a expression of interest, which is very similar to a statement of qualifications you might see with a design build construction contract, where they're sending us their resume and some of their past performance for us to determine if they are a quality firm that is would provide would be competitive in the next round and would be able to provide a quality technical proposal for us. So that reduced candidate list is not, it's not defined that we're only gonna take half or we're only gonna take 4. What we're really doing is, if we know we're gonna award 3 and we got 10 proposals, that reduced candidate list might get us to 7 proposals. It's just a stepped process to get to gradually, I want to say summarize, but progressively decide which firms are the standouts. So we'll start at the higher level, the qualifications for the expression of interest. Now, some of our processes, you'll see this a lot lately, is we'll do a single step where they're sending their qualifications and they're sending their technical responses. So we'll call that a single step. So that one would not have an expression of interest. So if we get 10 proposals, we're reading all 10 proposals. It's not a situation where we're reducing that list based on qualifications up front. At this point, we would notify the selected firms that they're on the reduced candidate list and be moving on to the next phase, and that non-selected firms would be given an opportunity to debrief. So this is the first debrief process. So this is the expression of interest process, which is going to be very similar to the technical review process. Okay, so the evaluation technical proposals, this is where we get into, when they're really building a narrative, they're describing their experience, they're describing how good of a partner they are, how well they can, meet the needs of this procurement. So scope of services, we'll discuss past performance. It will show that they understand the requirements of the contract. So, one of the things we want to make sure is if, we're hiring them for bridge inspection, that they know it's bridge inspection and the information they're giving us in past performance and the way they're describing their staff and the way they're describing their problem solving is related to bridge inspection. Highway inspection may be similar, may score well, may not score well, may score well, I don't know, but bridge information that is more closely related to what we're actually hiring for or procuring is going to score better. Work plan. So this is the example projects we talked about. This is the thing that we can get together for you guys. And this is how they would approach a sample project. And this can be done as an oral response or as a written response. If we do have orals, everyone has an opportunity to bring in a team. We give them instructions to limit the team, limit the the amount of put constraints on it so we don't have teams coming in with completely wildly different sizes of presentations. We really want to be able to compare apples to apples. It gives us an opportunity. Some people do well in person versus on paper. So if we choose that orals would be better for that proposal, we'll put it up front that that's what we're expecting. Talk about the key staff again. So if the key staff wasn't ranked during the expression of interest, we will rank them during, if we're doing a single technical, we'll rank them during the single technical. Subcontractor commitment. So this is the first time where they're going to start saying, hey, these are the subs we want to work with. And the subs are agreeing, yes, we're going to work with this firm. This is not specifically for DBE or MBE or VSBE. This is just, we're getting reasonable assurance that this firm and the team that they say will work on this contract are actually committing to work on this contract. And then additional follow-up, we may ask for more detailed financial documentation. We may ask at this point for more detailed insurance information. But we definitely, prior to the end of the contract, so sometimes in the price proposal phase, is when we'll actually lock in those insurance papers and verify that they meet the requirements.
Jeff, just a quick question.
Yes.
I know sometimes when folks have superstars in their firm, they show them on their list, on their org charts, but then they don't necessarily show up when the work's being done. How do we deal with that? Is that obviously once they've got the job, they've got the job, but do we sort of document that so that we remember that the next time that comes up?
It's yes. So, but the way we approach that, and it's not firm specific, but we, when someone provides a key staff person, the expectation is that is our contact, that is the person
Right.
for the contract. But we provide an opportunity to substitute staff. So if that hotshot isn't going to be able to work on the contract, they have to provide us a staff member that meets or exceeds their experiences. And that's something that, as a procurement officer, I will review to make sure they meet the min quals. But the engineering team would actually look and say, okay, this person is as good or better.
So they have to notify you if they're going to do the switch, basically.
They have to notify us.
Okay.
There's also in some recent contracts, we started putting some language. I don't know that's in our A&Es yet, but we started putting language about damages if we don't get the team that we were proposed.
Okay.
And
Great.
we
Thanks,
do.
Jeff.
Yep. We do understand that there will be substitutions, but we have measures against getting what's the phrase I'm gonna
Bait and
I can't
switch.
think of it now. Bait and switch. Thank you.
Wait,
Yes.
that's it.
Yeah, thank you. So the final technical selection. So the consultant screening committee is made up of subject matter experts Typically, it's headed by the main contract manager for the contract, but that's not always the case. So the procurement officer will work with the consultant screening committee. Here at MDOT, the procurement officer is not a member of the consultant screening committee. Because we don't have the depth of engineering knowledge to really evaluate, the key staff and the past performance. But we are able, obviously, because of our procurement expertise, to check for responsiveness and responsibility of the proposer, and we monitor the evaluation process to determine or to make sure that the rules of evaluation committees are followed, and that everything is still fair and reasonable, and that there isn't any. I mean, it's a subjective process, so we understand that there's going to be some opinions, some bias, but our job is to mitigate that and make sure it's spread fairly, and then everyone is evaluated under the same criteria. A lot of times, what I like to do when I'm working with a screening committee is we'll calibrate at the beginning. We'll decide, okay, what's a meets, what's an exceeds, what's how do we want to treat pass or fail? How do we want to treat how do we want to treat the examples provided? Do we want to pull information from elsewhere in the proposal? Do we only want to pull information from the exact section it's provided? We will discuss this as a group so that every evaluation under that procurement is done under the same manner. Okay. We will send out select non-select letters. We will select price proposals from the top selected firms. So we will know up front, based on that CTP submittal that we sent, how many firms we're looking to award. If it's just one firm, we tick the top. If it's up to 10, we will pick the tightest grouping. It's kind of hard to explain without visuals, but if we have 10 firms ranked and say it's up to 100 points is the max, the firms that rank 80 and above might be in a nice tight group of like 7 firms, and the firms that are below it could be a 70, a 60, a 50. So we're going to look at that and be like, okay, the cream of the crop are these top 7 firms. These are the ones who showed us the best proposals. So we will decide to pick those 7, and then the engineers will decide how they want to break up the funds that we were going to use for up to 10 contracts amongst those 7. So we really want to, this just pushes us to maintain that we are hiring based on qualifications and the best qualified. We don't want to be stuck bringing on a firm that we don't know that will be a good partner or won't be able to provide quality work. So that's why we don't get really rigid up front when we say how many we're going to award. And then, one of the things we're going to look at is these 7 firms, do they have the capacity to do 10 firms worth of work? So we will keep that in mind as we're picking who we're awarding and how many funds they're going to receive, how much funds they're going to receive. We will then debrief non-selected firms. So this is the second debrief. This is not the first, but this is the point in the process where we may be most at risk for protest. So the debriefs are handled very methodically. We limit discussion only to their proposal. We limit discussion to their strengths and weaknesses. And within those confines, we try to make it a collaborative experience. We don't assume that the firms are going to be antagonistical. We assume that the firms want to know how they can improve. So we want to make sure we give them that information so that they might not leave happy, but they leave with knowledge they can use to grow. So it's a process we take very seriously, and a process that I will say I believe MDTA does extremely well, and we have been told in the past that we provide very good debriefings. So that's always a mark of pride because it's a difficult subject. Evaluation of price proposals. So the consultants will submit a cost and price summary, which is a breakdown of their hours and their overheads, and any direct expenses they might need under the contract. So they already know up front they're getting, say, a $10 million contract. They already know that they have to set a percentage aside for undesignated funds. So those will be used for any specialized work or specialized materials that we need to purchase, or that the prime would need to purchase to complete any of our tasks. So they already know that they have 5 subcontractors. They already know that 3 of them are MBEs, and they've already given away 20-some% of the contract, or whatever the MBE goal of the contract was. So, the prime contractor is not going to be assigning the other 9.5 million to themselves. They will be assigning maybe 5 million to themselves, and the other 5 million, or 4.5 million at this point, if you deduct undesignated, they would be splitting up to their sub. So what they're giving us is a piece of paper. It's called a cost and price summary. That is a breakdown for all their hours, and they're also giving us either financial records or a letter, which would be an approval rate letter from State Highway or any other MDTA auditor's office approving their overhead rates. And then we will be looking at certified payrolls. If they're going to say, a TET3 is going to cost $80 an hour, we want to look and see if that's what, they're paying their TET3s. So we will look at those, and then we'll do the math, simple math. Their overhead rate plus any fixed fee allowed under the contract, plus the number of hours at the rate of the hours, and we just make sure that the dollars match up. So when we talk about auditing and negotiating, it's us checking that math. It's saying, hey, you have an overhead rate, an approved overhead rate of 150%. We did the math and it came out to 160. We need you to adjust. Or you didn't provide any financials. We cannot give you 150%. We'll offer you 100% overhead unless you want to provide financials. So it's that back and forth. And then every time we make an adjustment, we do the math again to get to that final number. And it's not, they're not specifically committed to those hours that they propose, but what they're trying to show us is that they understand the amount of work that we need. They understand the amount of hours that's going to be needed of them. And they're giving us what we believe to be reasonable rates, reasonable hours. There are some times where I'll look at a staff position, could be, professional engineer, and one of them makes far more than the rest of them. I may say, I don't want this guy in the average. Like, it's skewing the average. We're losing hours under the contract. And it could be simple things like, they've put the wrong mileage rate in their direct expenses. They put, these wrong hotel rates in their direct expenses. So, we're checking these things. Another thing we're checking for is if they are a certain corporate structure, they may or may not be allowed to get overhead for the principals of the organization. So that's another thing we're checking. And it's not that people are necessarily trying to double dip. It's they might not understand, the process and the rules. So that's us going back to them. You're making those adjustments to get to what we want to get to is a final price for the contract that is not far off from our original estimate of the number of hours under that contract. And if one firm is way off, we'll spend a lot of time, figuring out that, that difference. If all of the firms are high or all the firms are low, then we know perhaps our estimate was a little high or low for this work. So yeah, at this point, once we're in the negotiations, you are essentially going to get a contract unless negotiations do fall apart and they're not willing to bend on some of the things that we cannot accept, some of the things that might not be reasonable. And also the responsiveness and responsibility of the contractor has not 100% been confirmed, because once we've negotiated all this price, we still are working on approving their MBE submittals. And we still need to receive, final signatures and approvals from, the contractor's owners and, acceptance of our terms and conditions. But as long as they're, understand that and they work with us, they will receive a contract. But we do try to expedite the process because even though we can split awards between two different agenda items, we don't like to do it. It's double work for all parties. But I hope my explanation here might explain why you might see us split up awards into multiple different capital committees. Okay. Agreement approval, prepare the contract so the Office Attorney General will review a form of legal sufficiency. So there's a standardized A&E contract template that State Highway has shared with us. And, we tweak it to our specific needs on occasion. In this contract spells out everything. It really does. It spells out the maximum amount of profit they can earn. It spells out the number of hours we expect them to work under the contract. It spells out the amount of direct expenses we're expecting them to use under the contract. And, these 50 pages of numbers are what we use when we're approving invoices, when we're reviewing, if they send us a quote for a task order, we're reviewing that quote, that these are the maximums they can charge us. And, we make sure that we're not accidentally overpaying profit. We're not accidentally overpaying overhead, and things change through the life of the contract too. So we allow for that. We allow for escalation of people's salaries. We allow for escalation of their overheads. They just need to provide that new information, right? Just like they were redoing the proposal, they would send us their payrolls. They would send us their approved overheads, and then we would make those adjustments during the task order approval and invoice approval process. We understand it's not going to change for that 5 years, but one of the things that we do not exceed is the fixed fee under the contract. That's one of those things we monitor very close, because our contract process is a cost plus fixed fee. It prevents overruns. If it was a cost plus a percentage of cost, there's the risk of overruns. So it's a type of contract with variable fee at the end, variable profit, and that's not something the federal government allows. It's not something the state allows, and it's not something we do with our contracts. So the contract management piece, I will admit this is not my day-to-day. So once the procurement officer has completed the solicitation, made the award, obviously we've been working with engineering the whole way, but at this point we kind of hand over the bulk of the management to the contract. So anything at a task order level is really going to be handled by the engineers. Anything at a contract level, so a contract modification, that would come back to the procurement officer to process. We also process reallocation requests. So if they want to adjust the amount of funds they gave to a subcontractor, because sometimes we don't know the full scope of work going forward. If we end up leaning too much on one specialty, we may burn through one of their subcontractors' budgets. So we may make those adjustments. We'll do that at a contract level. So when OEC receives the contract, they're going to hold a kickoff meeting, where, like any typical kickoff meeting, they're going to everyone's going to shake hands, introduce each other, and get down to the details of how to run this contract, what our expectations are, what they can expect from us. So some of the things that are discussed are how we're going to manage tasks, who the key players are, so the consultant team roles and responsibilities, OEC's roles and responsibilities, and our team members, how we handle tasks, how we handle invoicing, and more. We're careful when we say task. It's a work order, but task is the common phrase that folks use. And then the project delivery process, so the project initiation through design milestones to advertisement to construction and support services. So this is describing one of the things we'll have these consultants do is their task is not just one piece at the beginning of a design or whatever. We expect them to work all the way through the bid process, the construction process of that work. That is kind of the end of my prepared comments. I'm definitely open for questions, and I'm going to volunteer Jim if you have any specific questions about the actual work order management.
Jeff, thank you very much for your detailed report, and thanks, Member Gangemi, for asking this to be presented. Any questions? Thanks again.
Thank you.
The only question I have left, since I asked a bunch, is where did you get that funky question mark from?
It comes with the font.
I've never seen that one before.
Yeah, no, you can see it up here too. It came with the font.
Okay, I believe you.
Okay. Is there a
no,
question?
Seriously.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Well, let me first thank Member Cox for filling in for me. I figured I'd have a little bit of trouble getting in, and of course I did. A little bit late, but thank you for filling in. I appreciate it.
Thanks for suggesting Jeff give this report, and thanks for joining us. Have a safe trip back. Hope it's not just in a rowboat. So
I
with
understand.
that,
Well, I will move for adjournment then.
Thanks,
I'll
Rich.
second. I'll
all in
second.
favor?